want to help you learn how to use different tools and products so that you can be confident in your crafting. For that reason, sometimes I take a really in-depth look at a certain product and look at a lot of different ways how to use it. So today we're going to look at embossing paste or texture paste, or maybe you just call it paste. There are so many different ways to use paste on cards. It doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be terribly messy, and it can create such an amazing effect on your projects. Today I'm going to share with you, I think, 13 or more different ways to use paste on your projects. I'm really excited to share these with you. I'm thankful you're here with me today. I'm Anna Helman. Let's get started. To start off, I'll quickly share a couple of cards I have made in the past using paste, just so you can get a few ideas of what you can do with this, and then I'll be sharing lots more with you over the next few minutes. Here's one, has some paste. It was used with a mask, kind of in the background. Here's one, the entire background was created with that polka dot stencil and some paste. Here's one, we're going to talk about using embossing powder and drying it with a heat tool and some fun effects you can create. Here's one with a neat mask, both of these. This one I'll mention at the end, kind of a fun technique you can try. Here's one I received from another crafter. I love how it was used in the background. And here is just kind of a messy swoosh technique. We will do this on one of my samples. So it's just a fun way to add some texture, add some interest, add something a little bit different to your cards. It doesn't have to be hard, complicated, or take very much time, but it can really add a lot. I have two different kinds of embossing paste I'm going to be showing you samples with. One is just regular white. We can add some color to it, which you will see. And then the other one is shimmery, so it has glitter mixed in, which adds a really fun and beautiful effect. So if you're going to use embossing paste, what do you need? I was trying to think about this. There are several things that are helpful, but what you really need is just the paste and a way to apply it to your project. These are a set of palette knives I have, and I'll have links to all the products I'm using in the video description below if you want to take a look. But if you're really on a budget, you could probably even use a plastic knife or a plastic spoon. Now, they're not going to work as well. These are definitely really helpful. So if you can get them with the paste, I would definitely encourage you to, but you could play around with some other options if you want to. Wanted to mention quickly before I get into the crafting and forget to, when you're storing this, you want to be really careful to get the lid on tight. If this is not sealed very, very well, it can dry out quickly, which is frustrating. When you purchase something, you want to be able to use it over time. You really want to make sure it doesn't dry out. So I always leave the packaging that comes in the top. Usually there's this little foam pad. I've got a foil piece here. I like to leave all of that in place. And when I screw the cap on, I always make sure it's very, very tight. Now, something else you can do to really help is to put 1 or 2 layers of wax paper in here, right here, and just screw the lid on over top. That will help make sure it's sealed really tight as well, so it does not dry out on you. Okay, that is all for my intro. Let's get to some crafting. And what I want to do first is just a really simple example of how you can apply it to some paper to get a fun result. Now, you will be noticing the samples I'm using mostly have a similar theme. I have a product bundle I wanted to use with several of these cards. So you're going to be seeing a lot of blues and tans. And if you stick around until the end, you will be able to see some of my finished card samples. So there is no right or wrong way to do this. It is something that you just want to play around with and kind of see what happens. Now, with this one, I can apply it in a particular pattern. I can just do a swoosh. Like I said, you'll be seeing tons of examples. My idea here was to be creating something kind of like waves, and watch along. We'll see if this actually happens or not, because, you know, sometimes things go as planned and sometimes we come up with a really great plan B in the process. So I am attempting to make that wave pattern. I think as I keep going, I think I may go back and add some over, but just wanted to show you, kind of give you an example right off the bat that there's no right or wrong, and this is something you're just going to want to play around with. Every time I do this, I get different results, and they're always neat and unique. This is something fun. Even if you make 20 of the same card, every one of them will turn out different and unique and one of a kind. Okay, so we don't have waves, but I'm totally okay with that. This just gives you one example of what you can get when you are using paste. Now, I'm going to set this aside to dry. The other option for drying is to use a heat tool and encourage it to speed up a little bit. And I will show you that here in a little bit, because when you use a heat tool, you actually get a little bit different effect. I will mention this while I have paste on my palette knife here. You want to be sure to clean up your supplies as quickly as possible. So if you're going to be spending some time with paste, what you might want to do is get a bowl or a bucket or something, put a little bit of water in it and keep it at your craft area. And when you are done using a particular knife or a mask or something, you can drop it in there just to keep it wet for a while. This paste can dry quickly, and once it's dry, it is very difficult to remove. So several times here throughout, you will be seeing me clean up some things so that they don't dry while I continue making my video. So here's just a basic example. Set this aside to dry, and we'll move on to another one. And this is kind of fun. I had done this a while back. You can apply the paste directly over anything, over a background on your card, over punches and die cuts are a fun way to do this. So I wanted to show you an example here with this bird. And if you apply it thin, in a thin coat, you can actually see through it, which is a neat effect. So I done this a while back with some fall cards and some pumpkins and the shimmery paste. They turned out very, very pretty. And I thought it would be neat to do this with one of my bird die cuts here with this set I'm going to be using. So here I just have a little bit of texture, a little bit thicker there, kind of some extra interest, and I will set that one aside to dry. Next, let's add some color to some paste and see what kind of an effect we can get with this. This is a tool that is helpful if you're going to be using some paste, not required. You could do what I'm doing on some scrap paper, but this is definitely helpful if you can. It's a silicone craft mat. It is a good place to make messes that are very easy to clean up. And I'm debating whether I have enough on there. So I like to put some of the paste out, and then I want to bring in some of my ink refills and add them to that paste. So I am going to use some Pool Party. And this is another place that playing around with it is good to see how much color you may want to add or what colors. Also going to add 1 drop of soft suede. So now I'll use my knife and we will mix this around a little bit. I'm going to try to keep these somewhat separate, not completely. When I put them on my card, they will get mixed up a bit more. And if you haven't figured it out yet, what I'm going to be doing with these cards at the end, some of them, is to create some ocean and beach themed projects. So now I just want to smear this across this card, and there are so many different ways you could do this. You can do it straight, you can do it in a circular pattern, we could go diagonal. If you don't like your paper moving around on you, you may want to tape it down with some washi or some removable tape. What do you think about these colors? I thought this would make for a really fun mix. So adding color is a really fun way to change up how you can use your paste. Next, we are going to use the paste with You can use it with masks or stencils. I am going to show you actually with an overlay die cut that I've created with a really beautiful die set. The die set is called Two Tone Flora. It's coming out soon, January 5th, with some of these other products I'm using, which I will show you in a little bit. So let me bring this in. And I better get a new sheet of grid paper. Grid paper or some kind of scrap paper is going to be very important for this so that you can clean up your workspace and keep creating. So what I want to do here is I am going to mix some paste, mix some color into it, and I'm going to use the shimmer paste this time. Love the shimmer paste. Here, this is already starting to dry a little bit on my craft mat, which this is always easy to clean up no matter what. It's not a problem if it does dry up on the mat a little bit. Just for a fresh spot to work, I'm gonna flip this over. So I'll get my shimmery paste and I'm going to mix in some So Saffron ink with this one. I have had these tubs of paste I'm using here. I have had them for a long time, several years. So I'm getting down to the bottom and they are the one I was just using, the regular paste. It is starting to dry out just a touch, which is affecting the way it spreads. Normally it spreads nice and easy, and I'm debating how much to use again. I don't want to get too much and then waste it. That's probably plenty. But this shimmery, feels just like new, and I've had it for a long time. So I have just a piece of white cardstock. Here is that beautiful die cut. I am going to lay this over the top. I had set this out, I should say. I had flipped the die cut over and used some of my green bottle glue. Love this stuff, use it for everything. Put just little bits around the outside and on some of the larger areas where the flowers are. I let that dry. So after it's dry, it makes a removable adhesive, which is really handy. I use this in a lot of different ways. And after it was dry, I put it against my shirt a few times to pick up a little bit of lint. I don't want this to be too sticky because after I'm done, I'm going to remove it. So I have my shimmery embossing paste. I want to get some of my So Saffron ink, add 1 drop. I thought this would be really beautiful to have just kind of like a creamy vanilla, very light yellow color over top of a white background. So that is what I am working to create, kind of just really light, soft background for a project. And now that we have this mixed, it doesn't really have to be mixed perfectly. If you only mix it some, you can get darker and lighter areas, which is fun. And a lot of times what you'll find is when you start applying it, it's going to further mix the colors as well. So with this, it's really easy. I just smear it straight over the top and it is going to fall into those gaps. And I can smear the excess off the top. Looks like I mixed up about the perfect amount because I am not going to have much extra. Something that's kind of fun when using masks is not to go straight to the edge. With my one card that I'd shared, actually this is a good one, several of the ones I shared, show that as you get towards the edges, you can kind of lighten up and not do the whole thing. That's a fun effect. But for this one, as you can see, I am applying all the way to the edge. So I'll wipe this off quickly. I could go back and smooth that out, and actually I'm going to, because my plan with this is that I will be able to use the red piece on a project and also the background on a project. Now, if you want to create one of these overlays that you can use several times on a particular project or use it you know, use it today and save it in your collection, be able to use it for a long time to come. Something you may want to do is cut your die cut out of some window sheets or some acetate, which is basically a thin sheet of plastic. So if you do that, then you will be able to keep using that for a long time. Now, hopefully, I see some pieces. We'll see how this comes off, if it comes off perfectly. Looked like I had some red pieces, maybe wanting to get stuck, some little very detailed places. And the quicker you remove, the easier this will come off. So here you can see, now before this dries, I'm gonna spend a minute picking these small pieces out because I don't want those in there, and I'll be right back. So here you can see what I have created. Now, if you watch along with my videos, you'll see that sometimes I'm trying things for the first time on camera. Now, I've done this before. What I haven't done is this with a different color of cardstock on top than I have on the bottom. So I have some of those little red highlights. They're the little tiny paper fragments from the die cut that have stuck in here, and I actually really like this effect. So I like to leave things in my videos so that you can learn from them as well. Now here is the overlay piece, which is beautiful, and I'll be able to use it on another project. I want to use this one to show you another technique here in just a second, but before I do that, I want to prepare a few pieces that I'll be using for another purpose here in a minute, because I want them to dry a little bit first. So this is something, depending on what you're creating, you may want to work with that paste nice and fresh, or you may want to actually let it dry a little bit. So let's prepare a few pieces. We're going to set aside while we do one thing to that lovely red die cut. So on these, on this one, I am going to apply it basically over the whole thing. Like I said, we'll set it aside. And you can play around with it to get it to smooth the way you want. This particular is a little bit harder to smooth because, like I said, it has dried out just a touch from when it was brand new. So we'll go with that. We'll let that sit here for a second. I want to apply some on here just in, I think I'll just do around the edges for a different technique. I do want this to be thick enough that I can do what I'm going to do next to it, which I'll show you here in a minute. And one more I will set aside for a second. This one I am just going to do at the bottom. Actually, while I have this one here, let's go ahead and do what I'm going to do to it. I'm going to change around my order a little bit here. We'll do a little impromptu stamping. That's what you do in your craft area, right? So what I have here is some craft sand. This is not actually real sand. You could use real sand. This just happens to be some that I picked up at the dollar store to use for some different projects, since I don't have a great spot to pick up some beach sand whenever I want it. And here is what I'm going to do, because like I mentioned, I'm going to be creating some ocean and beach themed cards. I want to sprinkle this on top, and just sprinkling it might be enough to get it to stick, or it might not be. You may need to actually press this in. So I'm going to sprinkle over quite a bit so that most of the surface is covered. And then I am going to press this in and set it aside to dry. Okay. So there's kind of a fun technique. You can do this with glitter. What other small things can you think of, like sand, that you could actually apply in that paste and let them dry? Okay, now we're going to do these other two before we bring back in that red die cut piece, because I'm changing my mind. So you can apply texture to these with different materials. Here's some burlap ribbon that I have in my collection. And I've done this several times before, where I apply, burlap is a really great material to get a fun texture. You can use actually just burlap fabric. You could use lace. You can use a lot of different things and play screen, like screen material for screen in your windows or screen doors. There's lots of things that you could use to get some really interesting texture on your projects. So there you can see the result of this. I like to let it dry before I do this so that it doesn't just stick to my material completely. And at this point, once it's set a little bit, it does a better job of staying on the project and showing that texture. Now, one more thing that's kind of fun is to actually stamp in your paste. So for this one, I wanted to apply it a little bit thicker. I did want to let it dry a little bit, and now I am going to stamp, especially in those thicker spots. We are going to get the imprint of this crab in that paste, which is going to be really cool for the background of this card. So if you want this to look even, you'll want to make sure you apply your paste evenly. I got mine on, at different depths across here, which I think is going to look really cool once I get this done. Now this, I want to make sure I clean up really quickly with a scrub brush so that that doesn't dry on it and I don't ruin my stamp. Okay, I got my stamp cleaned up, so let's get back to this. So let's talk about this one again. I use the shimmery paste on this. It's beautiful the way it is, but I want to show you another fun thing we can do with this, and that is to use the paste with embossing powder. So I'm going to pick up, what I want to do is re-wet a few spots on here to show you this technique. Now, this is something you may want to do everywhere. This is something you may just want to do in a few places. I am going to apply fresh powder in a few spots. Fresh paste, I should say. And some of the powder, that I want to make this fresh so that the powder will adhere to it. Now the powder may actually stick on this with it not being wet, since it has a rough texture from that glitter. So we'll see what happens when I sprinkle the powder over. And I'll bring in the powder. Here we go. A lot of times when I'm using powder, I like to do it over top of a coffee filter. It's a great thing to catch it, and then it's really easy to pour back into my container. So we'll sprinkle some of this and see. This is going to be the test to see if a lot of it sticks, and a lot of it is sticking. So what I want to do for this particular effect, if you want to apply it over the entire project and get an even look, whether you're using metallic paste or something else, you can do that. I actually want to get an irregular look to this so that you see this copper some places, but you're not going to see it other places. So I'm bringing my heat tool. I will heat set this and be right back. So let's take a look at this. I'll mention this. I really love these reverse tweezers when I'm holding projects to emboss them so that I don't burn my fingers. This is part of an Embossing Editions toolkit that will be linked down there below with the other products. So isn't this a neat effect to get some of those metallic accents on this die cut, just something totally different to give you some ideas of something else you can do with that embossing paste by adding the embossing powder. Here's the one I showed at the beginning where I had used embossing powder. So I had sprinkled gold over the entire, the paste on the entire background, heated all of that to get this particular effect. Okay, we have a few more, and then I get to do the big reveal of the cards that I will be creating with these. I really, really love one of the techniques I'm doing. It's actually going to be the last one that I share here in a minute. So here's a piece of pattern paper with the ocean waves, the look of the ocean waves, and I thought it would be fun to apply some paste over the top. So the idea for this is just to apply paste in certain places to highlight or accent a certain part of your project. A great example of this is to apply it to look like snow on rooftops, pine trees, things like that. Drifts, you can do just kind of swooshes back and forth to look like snow drifts. And I thought it would be fun to add some to look like waves here. So I think I will focus more on these light colored areas and apply it there. So doing this, you can really create some one-of-a-kind pattern papers, and again, just, you know, add some of those special accents to your projects. So we'll do a couple more of these. I'll do this one and then we will move on to the next one. Let this dry. So as you play around with this, you will find what works best for applying it in a certain way, which knife you like best. Like I said, the set I'm using came with 3, and I have yet to use, actually the one I haven't used yet, it's the best for smoothing. But you'll find which knife you like to use for different things. So set this aside to dry. And I'm going to bring in a piece of acetate. I mentioned this a little bit ago that you might want to do, if you're doing those overlays, like I did with the red piece, that you may want to do your die cutting out of a piece of this to make it a little bit easier and make it reusable. But I thought it would be fun to, let's bring in this one. I'll try and use this one this time, the one I haven't used yet. And I thought it would be fun to, which one do I want to use? We'll go shimmery. Apply some of this to some acetate. So I am going to do this kind of like I did on that last one. Okay, so we're gonna go a little bit like I did on that designer paper. I'm gonna try and get this in horizontal lines if we're looking at it this way. Big, thick horizontal lines, so it might actually be easiest to apply it this way. But my thought for this is it would make a really neat window card where you have the front of your card and you cut out a large rectangle from it so that there's a hole in the front of your card basically, but the outside is all still there. And attach this as kind of like a little peek through. Attach this behind it. Have a little peek through to the inside of your card, but some of it will not be visible, the parts that are behind that paste. So again, you can imagine loads of possibilities with this. You could use it with a mask and get a really neat pattern. You could do any of the other things I have shared with this as well. Apply some color to this paste. Okay, so we'll set this one aside to dry now. I have lots of pieces sitting around drying, waiting to become projects. So I have one more I want to share, but I want to save it until the very end because I'll have to do a little bit of cleanup again. So let me mention 2 things, 2 places you can get some more ideas for this from some of my other videos. And they are using pastels, chalk pastels. I showed this card at the beginning. And something you can do instead of just mixing in droplets of ink to add color to your paste, you can actually add in shavings of these chalk pastels. So can you see that the color in this is kind of spotty in places? It's a little bit smeared in this area, but this is a really fun effect and another way to use pastels. I have a really detailed video on these, I'll link to in the video description. And then one more idea is to use gilded leafing. Can you see this beautiful gold stuff in here? This is a really fun product to add to projects. And I have an idea where I've shared how to mix gilded leafing into paste on a fall card with some wheat. It was like a harvest Thanksgiving type card. So I will link to that in the video description below. Now, this one might be my favorite. This is so much fun. This one, I'm gonna be honest, gets a little messier than some of the others. But a little mess is kind of fun sometimes. I am going to smooth a thin coat of my regular paste over the surface of this crumb cake cardstock. Getting a thin coat is a little bit harder since mine has dried out some, but I'm pretty sure I can handle it. Doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. It will likely smooth itself when we do what we are doing to it. You can color this, you could do the shimmer paste. You can mix and match all of these techniques I'm sharing. But here's what we are going to do. We are going to put this inside of an embossing folder. You may have guessed that since it's been laying here where you could see it. And you want to decide whether you want the texture pressed down or up. So make sure you put it in your folder the way you want that texture to turn out. And close your folder. Like I said, this is a little bit messy, but comes with really, really neat results. So I've got my cut and emboss machine here, and I need some extra scrap paper. I am going to use 2 sheets of scrap printer paper, copy paper. I save old papers and mail in things that I don't want, and I use them for things like this. And I want to make sure to get these layered on top and bottom because some of that paste is very likely to come out when I run this through my machine. This is my cut and emboss machine from Stampin' Up. I absolutely love this machine. I had a very unfortunate incident a couple of weeks ago. I broke my machine and I thought this machine had a 1-year warranty. I was very excited to find out it has a 3-year warranty and my machine was still covered and I got it replaced for free. So if you're in the market for a new machine or if you don't have one, it is wonderful. It cuts better than any other machine I've ever used. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I do need to get it out of here fairly quickly and get it cleaned up really fast so that this doesn't try to all dry and then we have problems. Okay, so I will be back real quick. We're going to look at some finished card samples. I'm back, got my embossing folder cleaned up, and I finished these cards. So I want to share them with you. Now I'll show you the products I used to finish them for the most part. This is what I had in mind the whole time, that I wanted to create some cards with the Seaside Babe bundle. It's beautiful, comes with some really gorgeous designer papers. And I'll show you these real quick because I did bring in some greetings from these 2 stamp sets. These are mostly new products coming January 5th that will be available for ordering then. So let's take a look first. Now I'm going to be honest, these cards took a lot different path than I envisioned, but hey, when you start creating, you never know where you're going to end up, right? So here is my first card. What I did, instead of using all of the big pieces as backgrounds, I ended up cutting some pieces and parts and combining them. Here you can see the one I used with the burlap ribbon is the background. I took the one where I stamped the crab into it, trimmed it off to the parts that I like the best, and used it as a layer. And then I took a very thin strip of this, I forget what it's called, that embossing folder. I just had the cane weave embossing folder piece and just cut a thin strip off so I have the rest of the piece I can use on another project, and then added a few die cuts over top. I think this turned out just amazing. Now let's look at another one. This one also uses a die cut from that same bundle. Love the bird. This is the one I put that embossing paste over. And you can see, if you go back and look at what it looked like at the beginning, it was a lot more clear. Here you can compare to the stamp on the set. So it does cause that ink to bleed a little bit, but I think it's a neat effect that comes along with it. The very first piece I demonstrated as a background that I was trying to create waves, and it didn't turn out that quite how I anticipated. I ended up punching those pieces, using it for these punches, and I really like them. You can see the background piece I used, and I trimmed that piece with the sand off and used it down here at the bottom like the beach. So if you are adding in glitter or sand or anything like this, you can see how well it sticks. If you feel like you need to seal it with something, I recommend some clear spray paint, spray sealer, spray paint, clear, and I like to get the matte, not the glossy, because I don't really want my cards to be shiny when I seal them for different reasons. So love how that turned out. And one more, and then I'm going to show you one last card I created with the Seaside Bay set that I did the other day. It has nothing to do with paste, but I thought I would share it since I have these other cards here. Here is that one with that really neat background. I put it over some vanilla cardstock for the base. And can you tell I used the piece I'd created underneath this? I cut some real thin strips and put them right behind that greeting just for some layers. And then I have the rest of that piece I can use for another project as well. So there are my paste cards, and one more Seaside Bay card that I thought turned out just adorable. This uses some of the designer papers in that product suite. Use the greeting from the set. I love that wood grain designer paper there. And these little decorations, I cut them all out of designer paper except for this one, except for the shells. I cut those out of cardstock. These other ones with various colors, I cut them all out of designer paper with the die set, which was really easy, and I love how it turned out. Now, I haven't finished the inside yet, but you can see this is a really fun fold. Created this during my team get-together with other demonstrators on my team here not too long ago, and I wanted to share that with you. So thanks so much for watching along. I hope you learned some things about paste. I would love for you to try one of these ideas or lots of these ideas and see what you can create with some paste as well. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.